All right, so if you watch my channel at all, you've seen that I do a lot of videos on the fundamentals of sword strikes, basic pel work, kind of the simpler stuff in the sport, mostly because I believe that I shouldn't teach something I don't think I understand fully. And I think that when it comes to more complex skills, I'm still a beginner, right? I'm 2 years into this. I'm in no way an expert. I would never call myself good at this, just someone who really enjoys it. So I like sharing the things that I know about that can help others get better. Along those lines, I had a request from Bulldog, also known as Josh, a Bulldog who fights us at the Hall, who's one of our newer fighters, asked me to go over the different types of fights in detail. So, melees, duels, night fights / pro fights, and I'm also going to include chapter matches, which is an armored combat sport specific event, a league event. But it's really cool, and I think it's something that we should talk about as its own unique style of fights as well, because a lot of the strategies are very different than any other type of fighting. But in this video, we're going to start with duels. So this is a video about duels and what an armored combat duel consists of. So I'm going to give you the same caveat I'll probably give to every one of these videos, which is go check the rules for your specific event, for your league, for your tournament, because they will sometimes be different. I don't know all of the rules as well for the HMB, the other league, as I do for armored combat sports, which is where I primarily fight. We follow the IMCF rule sets primarily, unless they don't have a rule set for it, we've created our own. HMB has different rules. I will talk about the differences where I know about them, but I don't know them in detail. And then you might find a smaller league or a local tournament that modifies it. This is not like basketball where you can go and every three-point line is the same distance, right? Different leagues have slightly different variations. It is a combat sport with slightly different rules, and you need to make sure you know the rules for your sport, your league, and your particular event, because it will change slightly depending on what weapons you're using for things such as duels, which we're going to get into right now. So duels, primarily a duel is the finesse fighting of the sport. If anything's finesse, this is the finesse fighting. It is weapon strike, so it's edges of blades count for points is a general rule. So on an arming sword, it would be both edges, because both edges would be sharp on a real sword. If you were using a falchion or an axe, primarily it's the axe side, right? It's not the back of the axe. It's the blade side is the best fundamental way you can think about it. We'll talk about the exceptions to that in a minute with specific weapons. So let's talk about the most common style of duel is a 3-round fight that's 1 minute long for each round. And you are basically counting strikes. So the person who gets the most strikes on their opponent wins the round. Simple as that, right? Sword and shield, a very common style, will be like this. So sword and shield, you get your sword, you get your shield. The only thing that's going to really count for points is the sword strikes to the body of the other person. Certain things are off limits, as every fight, like groins off limits. Hands do not count for points. So make sure you read the specifics of each one, but that's your general understanding of it, right? So it's going to be weapon strikes and weapon strikes of reasonable force and on edge. So sliding your sword up someone would not count as a strike. Flats would not count as a strike. A landed strike. The way that it works is you're going to have counters, normally 2 counters for each fighter. So I'd have 2 people counting blows landing on me, which would give points to the other person. And the other 2 counters would count blows landing on the other person. So every time I hit them, they click their little clicker and I get a point. They confer at the end of the round to make sure that they have an understanding of the points, because you've got people on different sides, you might see different angles. They announce that to the ref, and the ref will declare the winner for the round. That is essentially how a duel works. Sword and shield, we'll talk about in specifics. So again, you only get points for weapon strikes. You are allowed to shield punch to the body, and you're allowed to push with your shield, but you cannot throw shield punches to the head. That is the rule for this particular fight. There's debate on why and should it be or shouldn't be, but really at this point, don't care. That's the rule. You can't throw kicks, and I don't believe you can do takedowns in sword and shield either. You're only getting points for the weapon strikes, for the edge blade strikes. Let's contrast that to longsword. Longsword is another very common fight you'll see, longsword versus longsword. Similar rules in that it is going to be weapon strikes that count, so blade strikes that count. But you also can half sword with that, and you can get points for strikes like this, blade on the opponent, and you can pommel strike like this. If you had a longsword, you can hit it with the pommel, and that would count as a point. The rule in longsword is you have to have 2 hands on the weapon. In ACS, that might be different in HMB. I don't actually know, but you have 2 hands on the weapon, so I can't pommel strike one-handed. I have to pommel strike two-handed. have to, basically half sword or cross check, two-handed. You get a point for takedowns. So you can throw someone in that. Is it to your advantage? Probably not. A lot of effort to get 1 point for a takedown. You might do it strategically if someone's tiring out, etc. You get 2 points for disarm in Longsword, and a lot of them you get 2 points for disarm, but realistically I've never seen someone go for disarms. If you get 2 points because you knocked the sword out of someone's hands, that's just like an awesome bonus, but not something I'd focus on. Difference in rules, I believe HMB, they have a slightly different scoring system for Longsword, so it's 2 points to the head, I think, and 1 point to the body, or other parts of the body. So if you trade blows and one goes for head and one goes for ribs, the guy going to head would get 2 points. That would change the strategy of what you're aiming for, maybe what you're defending a little bit more. But in Armored Combat Sports, ACS, the IMCF rules, it's just 1 point. So again, blade strikes, pommel strikes, cross-checking allowed. I don't think you can half sword in HMB. But again, check your rules, right? This is the big thing. Is just go to Armored Combat Sports, download the rules, read them. If you're new to the sport, read them. I think it's like page 14 on the IMCF rules on Armored Combat Sports. Like gives you the basics of all of these different events pretty quickly. We'll talk about the other variations that are a little bit weird. So sword and buckler, similar idea. So you got buckler, that little round metal shield. So it looks like sword and shield. That isn't for this. Sword and buckler, it's first to 5 points in the round. So it's still 3 rounds, but going to 5 points. So if I go 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and I hit you 5 times, I'm getting 5 points, the round's over. So that one is a very different strategy, right? Because you can't be just going in and out shooting your opponent. You have to really have better technique, I would say. It's probably something I wouldn't be as good at. I prefer to, when I can, even in a duel, I like to overpower, get a bunch of points, and back out. Where here you have to worry about much more of counting. So sword and buckler is to 5. We have rules for poleaxe and greatsword, and those are all very similar to the sword and shield and longsword rules. I did actually look this up. I hadn't even seen this. I found it when I was reviewing the rules myself, that there's the long axe rules, which is like sword and buckler, so it's to 5 points. And I don't think I've ever even seen a long axe match to 5 points like that. So, but that's in there. You could hold that event. That is basically what your duel is. It's going to be really about that weapon. You're watching the weapon, you're watching points. It's a great event for newer fighters. I strongly suggest all new people start dueling first before doing anything else. It's low risk. You're not going to get hit nearly as hard in general, unless maybe you did like a poleaxe or a polearm fight. But if you did a regular sword and shield, kind of a starting duel, you're not going to get hit as hard. You're not going to have to worry about multiple opponents like in a melee. It's not as comprehensive an attack as a pro fight, a night fight, which we'll talk about later, where you got to watch out for everything. Kicks, throws, punches, strikes, all of it counts towards you. The duel is in many ways finesse and weapon skill based. It's to make sure that our sword work and our weapon work is on point, and we're getting points for landing those shots. Oh, the one thing I should say, and this is probably a given, is that in Armored Combat Sports and HMB and bow hurt, whatever you're calling it, thrusting strikes are never allowed. So that is the thing that is different from a real sword fight, I would say, is that you cannot thrust a sword into someone. You do not get a point for it. In fact, you can be disqualified for it. It's a safety feature of the rules. You can't risk throwing a thrusting strike. That's the one thing that could get up under someone's armor and really hurt them in a way that we don't want to do. So it is slashing, cutting strikes is what the sport is about with all of their weapons. Yeah, so that is an Armored Combat duel. If you have additional questions, if you want to know more, I would strongly encourage you to leave me a comment with anything specific you have. Send me a message. I'm glad to talk one-off if people want to message me on Facebook too, Woodchuck Knight. I'm happy to talk through any questions you might have. This is a really amazing sport, but it is a little hard to get into at first, especially if you're watching it and you don't know what event you're watching. The Knights Hall, we do a fantastic job, I think, of throwing pretty great events. Actually, I'm doing it, but they do, and I fight there. Really great events. But you'll see that sometimes they're mixed. We did a Love Hurts recently, 2 weeks ago. First fight we've had since COVID. And we had sword and buckler round first. So that was a first to 5 to win the round. And then, we had mostly duels, regular duels that were minute-long rounds, as many strikes as you get. And then me and Jack fought in a mixed weapon duel, changing weapons throughout it, which had its own variation of rules. We're not going to get into that because that was a homebrew made-up fight just for fun. But it can be a little hard to navigate them if you don't know what you're watching or why someone's winning. So first thing you want to do when you're looking at a fight is figure out, is it a duel? Is it a melee? I mean, the melee is pretty easy. That's like multiple people in the field. Or is it a pro fight / night fight? So those are the two that confuse people. A pro fight / night fight, which we'll talk about those rules specifically later, is closer to what an MMA in armor, if I have to describe it as that, because everything goes. You're getting points for kicks and punches and throws, and I wouldn't say points, you're getting ring control, you're getting judged as though a boxing match was judged. Versus a duel, which is weapon strike. So that's what can confuse people the most, I think, when they're watching it, is like, you'll see a guy, I mean, I could shove you around the ring in a duel, and I could look like I'm in control of the entire fight. But if I don't swing my sword, and the other guy is just hitting me every once in a while, he's going to win. He's going to win, because that's what scores you points. Again, if you have any questions, want to see other videos, let me know. I do this to help other people learn about the sport and get to know it and be able to train in it. So I'm happy to help in any way that I can. The next video up in this series, we're going to talk about the melee and the team fights. So I look forward to doing that and sharing that with you as well.